Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's amazing discussion with three great leaders talking about improving work with AI, such an important topic. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, PeopleReign CEO. If you're listening to the audio-only version as a special edition of AI in the Future of Work, welcome. As you know, we've published over 350 episodes of this podcast. We have a community of over 1 million listeners. You might consider watching the video version on YouTube as well, which includes a few visuals and real humans speaking on camera. Of course, we'll provide a link to that YouTube version of it in the show notes. You might have heard me say in the past, work will change more in the next 3 years than it has in the previous 300. Literally, since the first industrial revolution in the 18th century in Great Britain, we're fundamentally rethinking the relationship between humans and machines. At PeopleReign, we're positively impacting how the next billion employees will experience work. As hopefully you know by now, PeopleReign's the AI platform that automates employee service. Many of the most respected organizations in the world choose to humanize work with PeopleReign to automate IT and HR and other sorts of employee service tasks. We automate about the 5,000 most common tasks performed at work. The system's integrated with more than 100 common enterprise platforms. And you know what? Before introducing you to the great panelists who are really the celebrities in today's show, I'm going to set the stage with a few just opening remarks, just as we kick things off. And let's see here. The thing that I wanted to capture at the front end of this conversation is that as people leaders, as hopefully all members of Team Human, um, we owe it to every employee that enters our place of business to really think holistically about the kind of experience we owe to them. We want to create safe places where they can do the best work of their lives. And the way I encourage you to think about how to do that is to think about every place in the course of business where you create friction, usually accidentally, but there's a lot of friction for employees at work. Every time they're asked to do something or kind of forced to pay a tax for being an employee, that's friction. And that's taking them away from the thing you hired them to do, the thing that they were put on the planet to do, the thing that they got up in the morning excited to do. And so think about ways to extract friction in all aspects of the employee life cycle, everything from selection, from hiring, onboarding, making sure that their technology is an ally when they're doing work, never an adversary. Automate away the friction associated with, am I getting paid? Did the right amount of taxes get extracted from my paycheck? All those common questions that can create anxiety and really take people away from, take the good humans away from the focus time that is required to do their best work. Training and development show that you're investing in your people. Automation is a great opportunity. Think about delivering hyper-personalized learning paths. Certainly something we're joined by Armen, who'll talk a little bit about, that's an area of specialty for him. Performance management. How are you and your team performing? Vast treasure troves of data out there associated with how people work. We should use it to do a better job coaching employees through their life cycle. Of course, upskilling them. There are times when it could be that the right employee is in the wrong role. Use AI, use automation, use data to be able to shepherd those employees. There's a right role, a right career for every employee, and it's really our job as leaders to help those employees make sure they find that right role, and then all the way through to offboarding. All of those things are candidates for AI-driven automation. I mentioned over 350 episodes of the podcast. I've talked to a lot of amazing guests, some of my heroes, my role models, and a few insights that I feel like come up frequently on AI in the future of work. AI is the new UI, voice is the new app, something I firmly believe. When we talk about the important and fast shifting relationship between humans and machines, that's kind of what I mean. Envision a time when we feel like the applications or the technology that we use adapts itself to how we behave as people, rather than the way it has typically been, where the technology works a certain way. It's kind of calcified, and it expects the human to adapt our behavior to the way technology works. It's going to change. So we often talk about the ask economy versus the tell economy. And in the ask economy, we as leaders, we as uh, service providers, we need to get comfortable saying, what's best for you? What does an environment look like where you can do your best work? And that's different from the old way that service providers engaged in the teleconomy. I will tell you where and when to work. I will tell you what tools to use. I will tell you how and when to be online. It doesn't work anymore. Um, we can do better than that. In terms of celebrating the whole person at work, um, I firmly believe that anything that can be predicted is and will be in the future better left to machines, but anything that requires judgment or critical thinking is an opportunity for us to invest in bringing more humanity into the workplace. Um, Gosh, so nobody asked me to chair Team Human, but I decided I would. And uh, the most important part of today's discussion is what's going to happen next, and that's our roundtable. So I know that you showed up today because you wanted to hear from the real experts. And wow, we got a super panel. So proud to call all of these panelists friends. Those QR codes to at least Armen and Alex's, or QR codes to their episodes on AI and the future of work. That hourglass implies that Anthony's may just be on the way. In a couple weeks, that one will be published. Something to come back to and revisit. That's also a great conversation. Um, I'm gonna let the panelists first do quick intros, and then we're gonna jump right into the substance of today's important discussion. Starting from the left, Armen, great to see you, my friend. Want to share a bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, Dan and team. It's great to be here. I'm Armen Berjikly. I am a venture partner at Emerson Collective. I focus on investing in AI companies across the enterprise and consumer. Before that, I've spent most of my career in building companies. So I've been an entrepreneur through a couple, I don't know, orbits around the sun of company building, funding, team, and then ultimately acquisitions. And then in my acquisitions, I've led the strategy teams at companies as big as UKG, or most recently, I was CTO of a company called BetterUp. And so my exposure has been on tech company building and then now applying that knowledge, hopefully, across the spectrum to help other budding companies reach their goals. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you, Armen. The amazing, effervescent Alex Buter Shapiro. Want to say hello?
Hi. So Alex Peter Shapiro, I would felt honored to be the people leader invited to join this CTO CIO panel today, Dan. I've been a people leader at high growth tech companies for the last 20 years or so, getting to kind of grow and scale different size organizations, and now most recently at Jasper AI, where growing and scaling looks very different with the addition of technology into our human resources plan. So really excited to be here to talk today about that.
Great to have you. Our third panelist is a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's actually a technologist by title, but solidly a member of Team Human. Anthony, great to have you on the panel. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to the team. Anthony Moisant, I am the CIO and Chief Security Officer at Indeed. And Indeed, our mission is pretty simple, but also profound and directly connected to this. Is our mission is to help people get jobs, and we believe that that mission is more important than ever right now, given the large scale transformation that's happening. I think as we explore the conversation, the way that I think about this is disruption is happening everywhere. And one of the things that we can use to our advantage is purpose. Purpose can be an anchor, and we think about jobs being more than just jobs. We think about jobs being helping define dignity and identity and opportunity and in many areas of the world, safety. So as we think about how AI reshapes the workplace, we're doubling down with that idea that the human has to be at the center, and we are all to be more empathetic as a result of, I think, Dan, what you said was a lovely point. Strip the friction out of the things that actually doesn't bring anyone cosmic joy, so that we can focus on those things that can bring joy, that can bring clarity. So I'm very excited for the conversation.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, work as a source of pride and purpose. It's going to be a theme that's going to come up a lot here. Alex, I'm going to pose the first question to you. As you mentioned, you're the resident people leader on the panel. How should we be having the conversation with employees about what it means to potentially have your colleague be a bot, or kind of the incursion of AI in the workplace? How is there an opportunity, but also how as leaders should we address the just latent concerns that employees have?
It's interesting because I was like forming up this response in my head, Dan, as I was hearing you and Anthony talk. We've been talking a lot with our employees about what it means to build an AI forward culture internally, as well as what we see with our customers. And one of the principles we've put in place is experimentation builds empathy. And that's empathy in our sense from a customer standpoint. But what I'm seeing is a lot of empathy at the employee level for how much change and disruption is really being driven in this moment and how much discomfort there is with any kind of change. So even if we think about that lofty goal of taking away all of the friction and sort of repurposing that time towards things that people are most energized about doing, that change process is actually much harder, I think, than some of us who are talking about it might give it credit at the individual level. There's a lot of personal satisfaction that comes in with the work that you have learned how to do, know how to do well, find senses of accomplishment, and sort of that dopamine bump as you check things off your to-do list. And we're actually asking people to shift out of the work that they might have that confidence and conviction in their capability to do and shift more and more of their time into things that they haven't necessarily always achieved as much mastery in doing. And so there's that sense of loss and change and discomfort and potential incompetence that comes with that transition. And so for me, when I think about experimentation builds empathy, it's starting communicating from employees from this sense of empathy and deep appreciation for where they need to go on that change process and how you as an employer, if this is something you're committed to building from a cultural standpoint, have plans to support people through that change.
I love that. Experimentation builds empathy. Armen and Anthony, I know you have different perspectives. Anything you want to add to Alex's comments?
Different you, Anthony, if you want to take a shot.
Go for it. After you,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I extend that out a little bit to this idea of cultural change that's happening as a result of these technological change, and from my Alex's thoughts, it kind of makes me think that there's a couple rungs happening here. One, speed, right? So like if you go to like the Y Combinator demo days, and that's sort of like the paragon of change, the velocity at which idea becomes like touch, feel, and even gain revenue type product, it's insane. You're talking about like weeks, and there's kind of a joke of like I'll be in a pitch and I'll be like, wow, that looks like a really good replica of Salesforce. How long you guys been working on that? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, we started Wednesday. And you can all laugh and know that that's thin, but like the concept of that you can go fast is going to be really, really paramount. And I think the old excuses of I didn't know the knowledge, I didn't know who to talk to, I didn't know how to work through the code base, those things are all dissolving. Whether that's true or not, at least mentally they are. I think that's one. And then to this idea of empathy and how you build your sort of credibility, brand, impact in sort of a modern era. Yeah, I think it's going to be harder for individual heroes, honestly. Like, I think that systems thinking is going to be something that becomes more and more valued. And I think the way I would like encapsulate this is, it was people that just did great work were the highlighted people and that you'd look to them for both inspiration and guidance. But I think now it's going to be people that can make work that makes like other work better in a way. And I think that the examples of that would be, did you make data available to others that now they can do interesting things on? Did you show your prototype to cross-functional people and get their minds running? I think that's going to be a really powerful sort of view. So when I think about this adaptation that's happening, I see those the fronts on culture. Anthony?
Yeah, I really love that. I think the 2 points from Alex and Armen too. I think we just had a global all hands a couple nights ago for our colleagues in Japan. And there's a very similar question that was asked is like, given the transformation, what are those skills and the mindsets that we would recommend leaning into? And I think that curiosity that Alex is mentioning, the curiosity, I think is a super important thing. Experimentation is the other, is like we don't know what's going to work. So trying a lot of things and having a feedback loop is really important for us. And we've gotten a lot of success in that last bit that you're describing, Armin, of and then the show and tell and that catching people doing amazing things. And I think the thing that we are seeing a lot of right now is the maybe the failure of imagination is more of a barrier than anything else. The technology is not, this is not science fiction anymore. It's like, can we think about the art of the possible and beyond just optimizing what we do today? There's a different way to think about this, which is given the amazing opportunities we have with LLM as an example, with the new versions of AI, what can we just stop doing as a result of it existing in the universe, right? And I think that opening the aperture out and thinking about first principle thinking, system thinking, and challenging all conventional norms and assumptions and constraints. I think getting folks comfortable with that, I think, is a really important thing as an organization.
Do you think it's failure of imagination, or that's where I wonder if it's this perceived discomfort, or not perceived. I think it's this really real discomfort that comes with perceived incompetence. Because I think when you're approaching things from a first principles standpoint, what you're actually asking people to do is take like this beginner's mindset. Like it's yours to re-envision and reimagine how things get done. But what we forget is that when people are beginning at things, we support them very differently as organizations than we do once they've achieved some level of capability. And so we're essentially sort of like rebirthing these organizations, which looks very different at the people, team, and leadership level in terms of how you support individuals. But I think that's a shift we're still learning how to make at the people, team, and leadership level. Like how much are we expecting these beginners to have that institutionally versus on the flip side, what you're saying, Armen, about the democratized access to like the ability to build prototypes is just so radically different. So on the other hand, you actually can see this question of like how much centralized support is really capable to be provided when everybody is going to interpret and use this technology so differently. So honestly, that's the tension we struggle with a lot internally, is like we want to find this way to sort of raise the floor of capabilities in the organization and build support for everyone who's beginning. But we also have some set of people that are kind of raising the ceiling at the same time. And they're like so far ahead of that experimentation curve, and the access to tools has leveled the playing field so much that they're like already off and running on this like very new and innovative set of things. And we have to coexist both of those polarities in our organization.
Yeah. So Alex, if I could jump in on that one, that's a really great point. At BetterUp, we had that exact situation. We had sort of a cadre of more senior engineers that were just like obsessed, right? Like they're just part of the technorati on X, and then you had most of the folks kind of being like, "Hey, what is this AI thing?" And honestly, if we're addressing it sort of in the emotional context of like, "Hey, is this thing an adversary or an ally?" And so what I ended up doing is recruiting those engineers that were the, let's say, lighthouses, and kind of challenged them to get everyone up to speed. And it doesn't sound like such a breakthrough, but we ended up creating something called an AI flight school, which cohort based, we would grab, 8 to 10 people. First it was volunteers, then it was voluntolds, and have them pair up with that individual over a course of, I think it was 3 to 4 weeks. And it was from the full like stack of training, like get used to these tools, know what they're for, start playing with them. And then in that little cohort, you end up with a microcosm of expertise, innate talent, curiosity, fear, uncertainty. And because they're cross-functional, you start to see some of the things that maybe as an engineer you don't imagine, that there's either political or say emotional challenges to suddenly becoming digitized and high velocity, et cetera. So that's one sort of tangible thing that at least you see company leadership say, we're not just throwing you to the wolves to figure this out, and it's like on you. Let's try and create some structures. Obviously not perfect, but I think that's one example I wanted to share based on what you said.
Yeah, and I think Alex, I think one of the things that you mentioned, is it always a failure of imagination, probably not. But I can tell you, like, I have these debates with I have a daughter, 22, I have a son, one of the things my son is 20, I think about like the curse of expertise, right? And I think about like for me when I have a failure of imagination, and it happens very, very often, it's where I've got the incorrect anchor, right? I'm trying to force fit new realities into an old framework. And I think this is part of why I'm so excited by like early career. How do we infuse the new blood? We're very effectively right now is like AI has been disrupting a lot of early career folks. Computer science engineers are having a real tough time getting interviewed right now, right? And there's this theory like, okay, because coding solutions can do as good, if not a better job than your entry level engineers. But it fails to address the imagination in that what should an early career person do? It actually is infusing the organization with new antibodies, infusing that organization with fire, fire in the belly. And so I think it's actually what we believe deeply that building up expertise across the whole base is really, really important. But I think breaking the anchor of what used to be is the way to do it is another thing that's really important. I'm curious if that resonates.
That resonates so clearly. I think this distinction between early career roles and early career talent, and one of those might really materially change, but we still have a responsibility to the other one and so much opportunity from it. I think Dan, I told you the story where we met, but I had this one like divergent day where I had in the morning had breakfast with a bunch of HR folks who were all like, clutching their pearls, like, what are we going to do with all these new grads that don't have jobs and we don't know what to do and we don't know how to adapt our programs. And then the same night I had gone to like a parents' drinks for my kids' school and everyone was like, nobody's learning anything. They're all using ChatGPT to do their homework. Like they've basically like completely, they have an infinite access to knowledge at their fingertips and they've lost all the skill sets that we thought we were so, going to libraries and looking things up. And it just to watch it in the same day and get to kind of have that moment of we're about to graduate like an AI native set of people into this world who aren't going to have thought about how to adapt their workflows. They're just going to build their workflows with this technology in mind. And to your point, like they're not going to have this anchors on, oh, well, that's not possible. Like I basically have to establish a set of workarounds. They're going to have that possibility at their fingertips from the very beginning at which they first getting started, assigned new tasks. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch in the next few years, like how that really shifts in the workplace for sure.
Alex, in our conversation on the podcast, we started to have an interesting conversation. It was short, so maybe it's something we continue here. I think we share a belief that there's kind of a changing, call it a social contract between the employee and the employer. And maybe depending on, to Armen's point, kind of which cohort you're in, are you the flight instructor or are you the student? The social contract may mean different things to different people, but it's pretty clear that the relationship between the employee and the employer is changing. First off, I think you agree with the thesis, but what does that mean? And then like, even knowing that, how do you act on knowing that that's changing?
Well, I think some of my thesis was that it was already changing, that it's always sort of been starting to change, but the last 5 years have been particularly disruptive, at least within like the technology ecosystem to a lot of what we saw as the sort of dynamics between the two. And so for me, I guess I'm very comfortable always when I know what I don't know. It's a very interesting question for me of how we actually integrate this technology in at the organizational level, because I think honestly, most things are still happening at the very hyper individual and like sort of cellular level of an organization. And understanding what that really looks like across an organization. To me, I have like a few companies that I've been watching and I'm running my own set of experiments. But I think you have to find a way to create the overall outcome that everyone has aligned incentives to drive. And then you have to figure out how to share in that incentive structure across the organization. I don't think we have like not quite landed on that. You know, I think some companies are willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is and sort of align pay and incentives in advance of what they imagine the outcomes are now capable of being, and others are still waiting to see if there's a little bit more certainty in what they're getting before they give it out to others. Super curious what Armen and Anthony have seen in their organizations.
Yeah, I think this is a very rich topic because I think this is a social contract that's evolving between employees amongst themselves and employer. I think, you know, given the intersection of HR and tech, right? Where does tech go? Where there's yucky problems? Where there yucky problems? Where there's like squishy human interactions? And I think that sort of the pressure to, I don't know, it's like a term we can come up with, like AI washing or whatever, like accountability, for example, like performance reviews. Nobody wants to do those. We've had 200,000 startups that have attempted to redo performance reviews, and now you can kind of be like push button, you know, review employee. But what does that do ultimately for the end game? Performance review, I used to say, is not just for reviewing, it's really for optimization, to get better at performance, to just create a blob of text that someone reads, cursory, and not build social capital, not build trust, not show knowledge, intimacy with the team that you're working with. You've missed the point. Right. And so you'll look technically competent as the manager because look, you finished all your performance reviews day one instead of day 90 with 1 hour left. But did you actually accomplish the goal with your employees? And so I feel like this tension of yucky problems that will have a superficial solution, but not actually move the organization forward as especially as these things evolve and we have more pressure to have the human side of things is where I'm like really fascinated, particularly in the seat that I'm in, seeing so many companies in their early stages. Anthony?
Yeah, I share a very similar point of view. I think that we're in performance management season right now, and we were thinking about this as like what is the core capability that we want to grow and develop and boost in the organization? In fact, it's more so on the manager side.
Mhm.
Can you be a better coach? Because a coach is going to help you map out the right trajectory and make sure that you understand what trajectory you're on. And the narrative is very often disconnected from the reality anyway, right? A performance review is a good example. I love the concept of the new social contract. I think that one aspect of this is that we've got to be honest and we've got to be transparent. We've got to be direct. We've got to describe what we know and what we don't know, I think, in a very direct way. And it got me thinking as you mentioned this, Alex, the new social contract. I think we've danced around a few of the risks actually as an industry. We've danced around in like I think probably one of the most damaging statements that I've ever heard now with hindsight being 2020 has been, AI is not coming for your job. Someone that can use AI well is coming for your job. That's true, maybe, but there's lots of layoffs happening right now. There's a huge disruption in the service industry right now. There's a huge disruption in pretty much every area of white collar workers, as an example. And so I think that when we wash over that, when we duck that, we are actually increasing the uncertainty in the market. We're increasing the risk of actually wide-scale adoption and wide-scale engagement. And so I think one of the things I would love to see is a way that we can describe to people that there's an unknown and describe to people that that is also scary and there's huge opportunity, right? How to do that and how to do that well is something I'd love to learn from you on and how you think about it.
Dan,
Anthony, yeah, please, Alex.
Yeah, I feel like you and I talked a lot about how tech is shaped by those who build it and those who buy it. And that a lot of, like I can get really passionate about that in terms of democratizing access and bringing populations that don't see themselves represented in AI into the fold. But I think that there's some aspect of it that's understanding that we are still very much shaping what that new reality looks like. So anybody who believes that they really have some crystal ball about what it will look like, to your point, Anthony, they risk losing credibility because they are decently likely to be proven wrong. And any of the statements that they made with so much certainty before will then, I think, undermine the overall credibility. And so I feel like as leaders, one of the greatest skills you could have is to say, I don't know that. Here's what I do know. And I think being able to say to the organization, like, I don't know what some of these patterns will look like. Here's what I do know, is really, really important with this space. Our version of AI Flight School, which now I'm thinking, note to self, I might rebrand some of this because I like that a lot, Armen. But we talk about how our job is to make good sailors, not good weather. Like, we don't know what the seas are going to do. They're going to be stormy. The wind is going to change directions. What we're trying to do is make good sailors who we can have confidence can support themselves and sort of us as an organization through those changes in direction. But we can't make good weather. So we don't know like the length of time it will take for us to get to that destination. And I think that honesty actually really goes a long way with people.
I'm actually a sailor, and I'll say I'm also a world-class plagiarist, and I'm going to steal that and use that. Thank you very much.
To be
Sure.
honest, I stole it too. So it is a passing forward of great insight.
I just want to applaud both of you for, I think, hitting something on the head that the vast majority of companies do not, which is this idea of under communicating uncertainty, right? And I think we scare people and we do it while undermining our own credibility as leaders, right? And so we don't talk about the uncertainty that we're facing. And then I think the compounder is, as an employee, you don't even trust that the leaders that are already poorly communicating the uncertainty even understand the problem space, right? So we did a lot of research at BetterUp around this do as I say, not as I do challenge, right? And as it turns out, like if you as a leader or manager are a sailor or a pilot with AI, like kind of in a using it actively, you see a 3x lift on your managers, you see a 2x lift on your ICs, and it kind of compounds down versus if you just talk about it, right? And so it's this idea that you've got to do it, you got to be immersed, and then you communicate. And then when you're communicating the uncertainty and you're immersed, well, then finally people kind of go like, okay, this person gets it and they're honest about it. And so we're not speaking in these like large, abstract, monolithic concepts, but instead with a little bit more precision and a little bit more humility. So I love where you guys are going with this. And I think it's very important if you're on the audience here to pick this up and try and incorporate some of this.
So let me challenge maybe the boundaries of, I like that term, under communicating uncertainty. And I think one of the obligations that we have as leaders is to be able to address appropriate concerns from employees about where are the AI guardrails. We used to call it shadow IT, and we tried to, it was kind of a bad word. Now there's shadow AI. And because employees aren't necessarily sure what's sanctioned and not, they're going to experiment. It's just a matter of is it on your network? Is it with your apps or not? And so this may be a situation where leaders can feel blindsided because they're learning at the same pace that the employees are. And yet, they're increasingly they're expected to be kind of part lawyers and part psychologists and part technologists. What do you think is reasonable for an employee to expect?
He's essentially like looking at uh, how can you help your employees understand how to use AI? I can take a crack at it. For us, if I'm trying to be cute on a podcast with like a triptych, it's like transparency, training, trust, right? Transparency on what are the guardrails around what you can use, really around AI privacy, I think is the question. Everyone's a little nervous, right? What can you upload where is probably the more simple language. I always like add the asterisk that, you know, free solutions are the most expensive of all. And so get your enterprise agreements in place, companies. Like, it's $20 times whatever employees, it's worth it versus someone poking around with a freeware version and feeding your information to model training. So that's one side is, all right, where can you do where? And that's as simple as a document. Like, don't upload financial documents. You can't upload X blinded customer documents. The training side, we talked a little bit around like things like flight school, et cetera. The only point I'd make here in addition, it's like it's not a one-time thing. I don't think you can be like, here's all the ChatGPT stuff, goodbye. And you also can't just offload it to people who will ask GPT itself to train themselves, sort of. That's just not necessarily human behavior. And so investing in continuous AI literacy at the level of the org, I think is important. And then the last one's probably the most important one for me is trust. As leaders, I've hinted at it, like we got to walk the walk, right? And so giving people psychological safety to experiment, and cultural embrace of things of like, you don't really know what will happen or what is possible, right? That imagination that Anthony was talking about, we have to both say it and then provide air cover when things inevitably go sideways and experiments or pilots don't land. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean the technology failed. It just means that you're part of the movement. So transparency, training, and trust from my side.
Yeah, I love centering on trust as well. And I think, there's guardrails in the way that the way that we think about this, the way I think about this with AI is like oftentimes guardrails can also be sort of if you've ever bowled, taken children bowling, the bumper rails, right? Actually, you clear out a lot of friction and a lot of pain for folks by having happy paths, golden paths, things that are just ready for people to use. And we spend a lot of time building pathways for people to very rapidly experiment and very rapidly get to a place of a good answer, and recognizing that every failure is moving us forward, from an education standpoint. But trust is our license to operate, not just us for job seekers and employers. If they don't trust us, nothing else matters. But then as a leader, every small breach of trust matters. The broken window theory, I think, applies in every element of trust. Is like every tiny crack in the way that we communicate, in the lack of clarity, in the disconnects that we may show up, as leaders, can erode confidence. And that erosion of confidence gets just directly in the way. If we're being business centric, it gets in the way of outcomes. So.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. I might steal the bowling analogy in exchange for the sailing one. I think for me, it's been really interesting. I am blessed with a really wonderful progressive legal IT and security teams, of which I imagine, Anthony, you were among those company as well. But when I talk to other people leaders, not everybody is as lucky as I am to have folks who are really comfortable creating the space and place to experiment. And so I feel like we end up having a lot of these conversations that remind me of when we first did bring your own device, like policies at work. And I'm sure you guys both remember this, but as everybody was like, oh my God, where is it? We're going to be in everybody's text messages and what are we going to do? And I don't, they really need to have their own phones. And then what we, in practice we're seeing is like, even when we all had two different devices, there was still a decent amount on your personal device that was happening for work. And so until you leaned into that moment of like, let's meet people where they're at, let's understand their behavior and let's figure out how to support that in a way that we as an organization feel comfortable. And we actually owned up to ourselves that the behavior we had thought we could potentially push people into just wasn't working anymore. And that as phones were getting more sophisticated, nobody wanted to be carrying two of them. To me, that's so much of what I see and hope to see in more organizations, is teams like doing what you said, Anthony, which is creating those happy paths and saying, don't go out there and experiment with everything. We've pre-vetted, pre-arranged, and set up these options in a place where you are ready to use them. And then, bring us suggestions if there's other things that are missing so that we can get the friction out of the way for you to use it the way we best want. And so I think there's a real curve organizations are going to go through, but that's so necessary for me if we're expecting to really see the upside and gains from this technology.
How do we think about what it means to exercise AI responsibly, and what is the right amount of kind of policy, and then equally important, to the extent you have any advice about how to enforce a policy once you define it?
The thing that my mind goes to, it's like that pace of AI, I've referenced it multiple times. It is a pressure on the people trying to use the tools too, right? It's like, oh, I found, a problem space that's really driving my team crazy. I found multiple tools from random companies I've never heard of, plus probably, some version of GPT that can be, wedged into it. Now what, right? It doesn't fit some spreadsheet or some document. I need to ask someone. I ask my manager, they give me a blank stare, and they're probably biased against risk. So what you really need is like some combination of legal, HR, and the technology team to have a short, SLA type thing of like, we'll review a vendor, we'll tell you if something's gross, or if you can experiment with it in, let's say safe data, et cetera. That is a bit of a la la land in some ways. It's hard to find that type of resources, but I do, as my time deeper in the space comes, I'm starting to evolve that like that type of unit is almost necessary if you want your teams to proceed at the pace of experimentation. The other side is GPT just gets better and better, or Claude or whatever your sort of provider of choice is, Gemini. You could just kind of ride it out and their capabilities continue to expand and keep just pushing people into, hey, we have one approved tool, just keep trying to make that do the thing. But you're obviously shortchanging sort of best of breed versus a more general purpose solution. But I'd love to hear what the rest of the teams think, because I think it's a really important problem.
Gosh, I'll do my best as well. I mean, I think for starters, I find some level of core education really important for people to understand and be able to anticipate the ways in which they can use the technology either responsibly or irresponsibly. And so really understanding how much of the tools that we're using are trained on our existing behavioral patterns, which are like full of bias and challenges. And so if you're thinking about like some level of like next token prediction, what you're imagining is just a repetition of what already exists in practice, and then helping people to really like wrap their heads around what that means. Yes, that like image will distort itself to make what it believes to be the most likely answer to that. And so helping people to really grapple with that and sort of explain the technology in a way that they can start to anticipate, and then figuring out how to therefore impress upon people the importance of doing, and it's very tool dependent in my opinion, like whatever level of checks and balances you need to have on the technology, and understanding that human in the loop, and your responsibility is actually to do some level of audit around the outputs of your various tools. I think those two things going hand in hand, like understanding what will be problematic about the initial outputs, and then what your responsibility is as an overall owner of the outcome that you're trying to drive. And so for me, what we've been doing to date is really the enforcement is a lot at the outcome level. So maybe not necessarily within the tool itself, but in the product that you're delivering. If I have a candidate that's interviewing for a job and they have something on their resume that is factually inaccurate because it was not drafted by them, it was drafted by a tool, then I want to hold them accountable for the factually inaccurate thing on their resume. And this is genuinely something that I have now had happen in enough different conversations. I'm like, oh, tell me about this. And they're like, oh, that? I'm like, well, it's on your resume. And you kind of discover how many folks are using the tools beyond potentially what could have been informed. That's where I'm just holding them responsible for the outcome of having factually inaccurate things on your resume. I use AI to reformat almost everything. So no shame in having done that with your resume. But you have to be comfortable with the final work product, and that it represents the outcome that you intend for it to do.
Responsible AI is for me not necessarily just the rules and the guardrails. The foundational principle is that of trust. And I think if we think about every business book around trust that has ever been written, like there are some core philosophies around trust, and there's core philosophies around, I think, just like being a good human that we can align on, and that is transparency, right? It's anything that we do with AI should be transparent. For job seekers, employers, they should know how AI fits into this to the platform. What's happening with data. I think it's crucially important. I think equity is another thing that maybe this is not as popular in 2025 as it once was, but I think about this as like AI can expand access and can expand opportunity. It can open doors or it can close them, and it can narrow it, right? And so our point of view is that we don't want our platforms, AR or otherwise, to narrow opportunities. We want to broaden opportunities. And then the oversight, that's the bit where the guardrails are in place, where we want to make sure that AI is supporting decisions, but humans remain accountable. I think, Alex, to your point, is that yes, it's a superpower. It's an amazing opportunity. I have horrible grammar and I have horrible spelling. Every email you ever receive from me, I promise you AI is involved But before I hit the send button, I've got to be comfortable, Alex, to your point, right? I've got to be comfortable that I am shipping a product, and I have to be comfortable with that end result. And so, at the end of the day, I think, Indeed's principle is pretty clear that at the highest level, responsible AI really means hiring is and should remain human, regardless of the tool chain.
So let's say the four of us are back here having a version of this discussion, and it's August 2035 instead of August 2025. What's something that we've talked about so far that, we'll play the tape from this one and say, wow, that was so antiquated. What will have changed significantly in the next decade? Maybe, Armen, if I can put you on the spot, you want to start?
Yeah, I think a few things come to mind, maybe from like the least crazy to the most. One, I think Anthony's point is really important. This idea like access to AI will be equally distributed, but the ability to use it will not. And I think you're seeing that really schism happening already today, where in some schools AI is treated as cheating, and others it's like this is your pathway to the future, right? So I think that a really serious conversation around fairness and dignity and sort of a core set of capabilities that we need to instill upon all kids will be a pretty, I think, important part of societal conversation. Next hire is like AI teammates. I think right now it's super weird. We all go off and talk to our little private, AI thing, and then we like translate the language that the AI gave us, to a Slack message or an email message, et cetera. This is a very unnatural relationship. It's like a Harry Potter under the closet kind of situation, and that's not how we work, right? And so I think like, unified AI experiences where, you are working alongside or with an AI, even multiple people, what I call multiplayer, I think will be a sort of taken for granted. And then the last one's probably the more wild one, but Jasper and I have had a lot of fun talking about this. Personal AI representatives, like someone at, a digital double, effectively, your calendar, your compensation, your career path, your learning. It's going to be negotiated by an AI version of you, aligned to your goals and aware because of this multiplayer thing I talked about of the company in a way that you probably wouldn't be. I think that's going to be interesting. I'm not sure it's going to happen. But I think those three things are rotating in my head when I think of your question.
I think in 10
Go ahead.
years, it's going to be like comical that we're calling it AI. Because there's like a joke or a quote, it's like AI is anything computers can't do. I think that everything that we're into like every system and every design, and I think somebody will look back at this and be like, you just mean how all of the world works, right? You're not talking about this like separate monolithic entity, because what we're talking about is this like seismic shift in how technology is built and designed and developed. And I think 10 years from now, that will just become the table stakes experience of how we're looking at the world, rather than this like separate, discrete, innovative capability.
I love that, Alex. From my perspective, I think first of all, my calendar does not go out 10 years. My vision does not go out 10 years, but I'll give you a pass on that. I think several years into the future, I think the thing that we will laugh about is that we underestimated ourselves. We underestimated the human. We spent way too much time fearing AI would replace people and not realizing that we could move up the stack and we could free people to do more than the busy work. And this is beyond just creativity of the human. I think it is that our human potential has not been reached yet. And I think it's going to be incredible what we create. We're already seeing just incredible, advancements. And I think we're going to give people time back to do the most human work of all. And I think that, I'll say one last thing, that I think we're going to have a comeback of human talent. All of the layoffs that are existing in the right now, that are happening in the world right now, the challenges of getting people hired into new career, et cetera, like we saw in 2008, like we saw in 2001, there's going to be a vicious return to talented people matter regardless of technological advancement. And I think, the best companies are going to realize that talent continues to be important.
Armen and Alex and Anthony, this has been wonderful. It's the most, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think this is the most important conversation for our generation. And gosh, way more important than we could possibly convey in 40, 50 minutes. But we're going to wrap this one, and all I could say is it'd be great if we could maybe do another version of this, and certainly not in 10 years. We'll have some time in between now and then to be able to assess our prognostications. Hope you'd all be willing to do that.